Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our fifth meeting. It's my great pleasure to introduce a speaker on a very topical subject. Delighted to welcome Dr. Jonathan Parker from the home team, Keele University. Great to see him here. And as you will have gathered from his bio, he's a political scientist who specializes in the United States and very much its domestic politics and everything to do with elections. So who better to explore with us some of the possible vagaries of the forthcoming presidential election, on which perhaps the future, how dare I exaggerate, perhaps the future of the world depends. So I'm sure that there will be a focused talk from John, in which he's going to share a lot of his expertise. And I'm sure that he'll not be intimidated if you broaden out some of the issues in the Q&A session. But for the moment, welcome to John Parker.
All right. Thank you very much. Yeah, we've got just under a week to go. Tonight, I thought I would talk just a little bit about the elections, setting it up and discussing where we are at the moment. And try to discuss, again, I was trying to stay with the same topic we were going to have tonight. How do you rig an election? And will the American election be rigged? And I have good news and I have bad news on that subject. But again, we'll start with the elections first, and then we'll go into how you go about rigging a democratic election and the extent to which the Americans have done and have not done this. Okay, if we look at where we are, let's see if we go. There we go. So yeah, here we have the Electoral College. More about the Electoral College later. But yeah, again, this is the difficulty of the American election is it's not just a vote of everyone. We count the votes state by state. Each state gets a certain number of electors depending on how many members of Congress they have, which is population-based. It's not too bad, but it's winner take all. And that's the problem. So quite often the president does not win the popular vote, but is able to win the Electoral College. It's happened a number of times recently. It happened in 2000, happened in 2016, and we'll see what happens on Tuesday. But again, what happens is Hillary Clinton racked up tons and tons of votes in California and New York. She had millions more votes than Donald Trump did nationally, but she did not win the crucial states of Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, which are again the swing states again. This is the 2020 vote that Biden won. This was Biden's pathway to victory. Hillary Clinton lost these three states, and Biden won them back. And he won a few extras as well. Georgia, to everyone's surprise, Arizona, and Nevada. So again, these are all seen as swing states. Georgia a little bit less in play than it used to be. So we'll see what happens. This is a perfect tie. If we look at where we are in terms of the vote, don't worry about the numbers. You get the idea. It's a perfect tie nationally. Again, it's swing states we're looking at. The two key swing states, 538 predicts that the two states that might decide it will probably be Pennsylvania, because Pennsylvania is the most Trumpy of those three key states, and maybe my home state of North Carolina. And so again, if we look at Pennsylvania, Trump is slightly ahead. And so if Harris loses Pennsylvania, that's probably it. Although she could technically win North Carolina, but if she loses Pennsylvania, I don't think she's winning North Carolina. And then there's North Carolina. So Trump's again a little bit more ahead in North Carolina than he is in Pennsylvania. But again, this is all within the margin of error. You might as well flip a coin at this stage. We have no idea what's going to happen. Let me go back. The states. Okay, so yeah, just a little bit of my background so you get a sense of the full disclosure of where I'm coming from. I try very hard not to be partisan when I am lecturing. I'm teaching political science in a polarized world, and again, I'm very cautious to try to not take sides in terms of partisan debates. However, that doesn't mean I'm neutral. I am from the great state of North Carolina. It is a purple state. My family is split straight down the middle in terms of who's voting for Trump and who's not. So my immediate family will definitely be voting Democratic, and my extended family is voting entirely Trump. With the exception of, should I name her? She's probably not going to watch this. My stepsister has privately told me that I am not voting for that man. So I don't think her husband knows that, so yeah. Hopefully she won't be watching. She doesn't know I'm doing this talk, so it should be all right. But again, I am from a split family. My father is a retired Marine. Our people, as we would say in North Carolina, are tobacco farmers from the eastern part of the state. My family is a perfect microcosm of that state. So I am very aware of Trump voters and how they think. I have taken my eldest child to a Trump rally in 2016 in North Carolina. We thought it would be fun, and he tried desperately to get interviewed by Sky News, and they didn't go for it. But a British person was not really news. But there we go. So again, that's my background. I am not neutral on this subject. I teach law. I am kind of wedded to the notion of the rule of law. I'm an academic. I've dedicated myself to political science, which is the search for some form of truth in terms of evidence. So a candidate who is a serial liar, is a convicted fraudster, and a convicted rapist is not someone that I am neutral about. That does not make me progressive or left-wing. That can also mean I'm conservative. Again, this is more about certain aspects. And again, most of Trump's cabinet would agree with me on the same principles. All of the high-level defense people who work for him have said he is unfit to serve. So again, conservatives have very, very deep split views on this in the United States as well. And then again, we'll see how this goes. So again, I wanted to set this up just to give the context for this. It's a very polarized society. Partisanship is everything these days. And so what I want to talk about is where we get to in terms of, here we go. Is Trump a threat to American democracy? Or is there a general threat to American democracy? So this is where we get to the good news and the bad news. And this is a question of who gets to vote, how easily can they vote, and are their votes counted? And this is how we get into how you rig an election. And so this is looking at the various things that are going on. There's a lot of worry at the moment about Donald Trump potentially stealing the election. He's more or less laid out the blueprint for this. He's not hiding it. I mean, Trump, for all his faults, it doesn't really do subtle. And he's been planning this since 2016. He tried it in 2016 in the most ham-fisted, amateurish way possible, which has gotten quite a few people convicted, and potentially himself, although if he becomes president, he cannot be tried for a criminal offense. So it's really important for him to win, and that will keep him out of prison. And then he'll try to pardon himself. We don't know if he can pardon himself. We've never tried this before, so we'll test that one as well. I was really surprised. I thought he would pardon himself in 2016, but he did not. He said there was nothing to pardon. So he does not lack confidence. Okay, so if we're looking at this, again, the election is on a knife edge. It could go either way. This is an extraordinary campaign where we had Trump versus Biden again, with majority of the country saying they would not prefer either of these candidates to be on the ballot. And yet, here we are. And you've had this talk from John Herbert this year. And again, we get the debate, the first presidential debate. Ironically, that Trump agreed to a very early debate. If he hadn't done that, then we would not have Kamala Harris as his opponent. But because he agreed to an early debate, he debates Joe Biden, the absolute disastrous debate that everyone was talking about. It became very clear he's in serious cognitive decline in terms of where he was 4 years ago. And the Democratic Party begged him to step down. And he eventually did. So we have a new candidate who is very untried. No one pays attention to vice presidents. No one really cares who the vice president is. People have very strong opinions on vice presidents, but they really don't swing votes very often. Again, it's who the president is who's more important. Now, Harris is unknown because no one cares about vice presidents. So no one paid very much attention to her. We have a very, very accordion campaign. She's having to do this very rapidly. There's debates about whether that's an advantage or a disadvantage. She doesn't have time to have a huge plan, but on the other hand, the Republicans don't have as much time to do opposition research on her or to do sabotage her character in the same way that they would have, say, to Hillary Clinton. So that's one advantage. On the other hand, the Biden administration is not terribly popular. The country is not feeling, okay, economic growth is not bad, but people are not feeling it. The same cost of living concerns are there that are in this country. And that's the number one concern people have is the economy, particularly around inflation. Okay, that is not a good record to be running on. And Harris has felt a little bit hamstrung in trying to distance herself from Biden. Second thing is immigration. The second most issue that people are worried about, and again, not a vote winner for Democrats. They've tried very hard to try to deal with this, but again, Trump is sailing in with a tailwind. He's attacking an administration that's not popular. He's seen as the change agent, for good reason. Ironically, Harris is trying to be seen as the change agent as well. She's portraying Trump as the incumbent, which is an interesting strategy. But again, it's on a knife edge, and we don't know who's going to be ahead. I suspect we'll have a result, but we'll see. This could be 2000 again with a perfect tie. We don't know. The polls in 2016 were biased against Trump. In 2020, again, they were biased against Trump. We thought the Democrats were way ahead, and they were not. We're not quite sure where we are this time. If the same thing happens again, Trump will run away with this easily. But the pollsters assure us that their samples are much better than they used to be. They've corrected for all this, so I'm sure it's perfect. Even if it is perfect, even if the Democrats are actually running behind where they were 4 years ago, which looks true, it is also the case that Trump doesn't quite know what his turnout's going to be. He's banking on young male voters, which is an interesting demographic. They tend not to vote, and so he's taking a risk. He took this same risk in 2016. It paid off. He took that risk in 2020. It didn't. So we'll see what happens. He has, in the ever so Trumpish fashion, he has outsourced his turnout campaign to a private company that he knows from Florida, where his estate is. And so he has privatized it to a company that's never done this on a national level before. So, I suspect money has changed hands, but essentially he's put the entire campaign in the hands of an untested company, not the Republican Party machine. So we're going to see what happens. Now, the Democrats are playing this up and say, "Oh yes, they don't have a ground game." We don't know. We'll know when we see the turnout figures. We'll probably have a result the next day, I suspect. But this is going to be about what happens if we don't. So in terms of rigging an election, there's a long history of this in the United States. I teach civil rights, and I'm old enough to remember segregation. I was just old enough to barely be around during the last vestiges of it in the 1970s. The minute I hit school in 1972, the schools have been integrated the year before. So I've never been to segregated schools, but I do remember legal segregation in the South. And so, I'm very familiar in my state on the techniques you can use to stop people from voting, historically. And again, that we spent a 2-decade campaign in the civil rights movement to try to get rid of that. And what we've now moved into is a more modern version of this in terms of depressing the vote. It's actually very, very hard to register to vote in the United States. It's not like here. I mean, I live on this campus, and every year someone from the local council comes by and says, "Hey, is this voter registration correct? Could you just confirm that, please?" It's automatic. And so, again, this is a very easy process in this country. In the United States, no, you have to actually go to some effort to do this. I am ashamed to say one of my 2 sons, who is American, is not registered to vote because I didn't get his Social Security card for him when he was 1 year old. And he hasn't gotten to the embassy yet. So he's not voting. The other one is voting. He got his Social Security card a month ago. And I got him registered to vote in time. But that's easy because we're here. If we were in the United States, it'd be a lot harder. So again, that voter registration is much, much lower than in this country. Voter turnout tends to be a bit lower, although from the Last few presidential elections, yeah, don't be too smug. British turnout was just under 60% in the last election. It was 67% before that, so not too bad. That's about where the American elections are at the moment for president. Trump brings out people like you wouldn't believe, both for and against. So, our turnouts look pretty similar at the moment. This is why it becomes very important. If you've got a perfect tie, then every little bit helps, as Tesca would say. So, if you can depress the vote slightly, if you can make it harder for people to register, if you can do certain things, then you can begin to move the dial a little bit for your side. Again, this only works with a perfect tie. But we have quite a few perfect ties these days because the country is split 50-50. So, okay, first thing, make it hard to register. Secondly, what do you do with the registrations? My state has a constitutional amendment on the ballot to ban non-citizens from voting. Okay, it's already a felony for non-citizens to vote. It's just a symbolic gesture by the Republicans. But nonetheless, we're going to change our state constitution because people might do something that's already illegal and carries a prison sentence of about 10 years. So again, it's not something I'm particularly worried about. It has ever happened in North Carolina, but nonetheless, it's a performative notion. The idea that all these people are going to try to vote, all these illegal aliens Trump claims that 2 million illegal aliens voted against him in 2016. That's why Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. So actually, she didn't. So he still claims he won the popular vote. He still claims he won the election in 2020 as well, for the same reason. Again, no evidence for this, but there we go. Okay, so you can begin to make it difficult for people. If you want to register to vote, we've had a number of vote efforts to try to make it easier. This is the whole point of the civil rights movement, try to get people registered, get people participating. It's kind of what political scientists like to see. The more competitive elections are, the more the population turnout, the better. If you're on one side or the other, that may not be the case. So how do you make it harder for people to register? You can put in very strict ID requirements, which we have in North Carolina. Again, North Carolina, all states require a social security number. That's what I didn't get for my youngest son, which really irritates me. He's a citizen. He's got a passport. Doesn't matter. He doesn't have a social security card. Can't vote. Okay, there's nothing in law that says that. It's the registration bureaucratic process. It's very effective at stopping people. Okay, if you want to register to vote and you're in North Carolina, you do it when you get your driver's license. But the driver's license office is a really horrible place, and again, they've been shutting them with budget cuts. And so, they don't stay open for long hours. So if you're working, you've got to take a day off. I've been there to do my license in the past year, and it took the entire day. And again, it's a very unpleasant place. There's a huge queue, and there's a lot of disgruntled, unhappy people that are sitting around you. So again, this puts people off. They don't really want to do this sort of thing. So that's who gets to vote. Secondly, how do you maintain the integrity of a voter registration roll? We have a long tradition in the United States of purging voter rolls. So we want to make sure that there are no people who have died. We need to make sure there are no people who are not citizens or who have been convicted of a felony. You need to remove them from the register. Okay, how aggressive are you going to be about that? The state of Florida is extraordinarily aggressive. And so they just get a huge database of names and they go through and they wipe them all off. And if your name happens to be Jack Smith and there's a Jack Smith who got convicted of a felony, tough. They're going to remove them all just to be safe if you're in the same place. So again, no problem. If you're Jack Smith, you just have to go down to your local driver's license office and you get re-registered. Who's going to do that? Have you told Jack Smith this? And they said, okay, no problem. We'll send a postcard to his last known address. And if you don't respond to the postcard, tough, you're off. So again, different states will approach this in different ways. You can guess which states do this. Republican states will aggressively purge the voter rolls. Second thing you can do is you can adopt a rule, if you don't vote, we don't know if you're on the voter register. You shouldn't be there. So if you don't vote in many states, they will, again, send a postcard to you. If you don't respond to the postcard, you're off. No problem. You can register to vote again. It's your problem, not theirs. So voter registration is not automatic. This depresses turnout, and it depresses turnout particularly amongst working class people who don't have the time or want to take the time off and lose their wages to go and register. It is difficult. It's easy for me, by the way, because I'm here, I can do it online. I could even vote online. Voting took me 10 minutes. I had an electronic form. It's the same one used by the military, and it was very easy. So that's the second question. How easily can you vote? Could you make it difficult for people to turn out? And this is, again, something that has been tried in some states. We do not administer elections in as professional way as you do. Let's put it that way. It's not civil servants, it's volunteers. And so, again, you've got to have a lot of people give up their time, take a load of abuse, and again, you have a few professionals who are running this, but for the most part, it's volunteers who are staffing voter registration booths and have to do a lot of work for this. And so, again, in order to save money, you can close down voter registration locations. So I think one of our exchange partners, where my brother lives, Boone, North Carolina, has in Watauga County, they have 3 voting stations, and they decided to shut one of them. And okay, there's a university, and there's lots of rural areas. Can you guess which one they shut? They shut the one in the university. Of course they did. And the other 2 are not accessible by bus, so the students couldn't get to them. And so, yeah, there was a bit of a hoo-ha over this, but they got away with it. And again, that's again, just logistics. That means you've got to take a bus to get to vote. The average voting time is going to be about 4 hours on election day. Now, to get around this, okay, the Americans aren't all, in a conspiracy to make this difficult. So we have this thing called early voting. You can vote up to 2 weeks before the election. It depends on the state. My state used to be 3 weeks, now it's 2. The Republicans shrunk it down a bit. So yeah, my father phoned me up and said, "Oh, we voted finally." And they went on the second day. He said, "Don't go to the first day because there's a big line." It took him 2 hours, 2 weeks before the election to vote. Being America, it was drive-through. So you drove up, the guy would run out, he would check your ID, he'd run back in, get the ballots, bring the ballots out, then he had to watch you sign them, and then so he had to make 4 trips back and forth. It was incredibly inefficient, and the guy was puffing, and it was, it wasn't raining at least. But yeah, you get the idea. The logistics of voting is difficult, and the more difficult you make it, the less turnout you get. And that's again, a crucial way you can do this. Another thing is, what do you do with people who are convicted of crimes? Okay, there's a huge hoo-ha in this country when the European Union said, you've got to let people in prison vote. There's no reason they shouldn't be voting. And there was a big controversy over this. In the U.S., it's not a controversy. We do not let people in prison vote. Tough. Now, whatever it is, if it's a misdemeanor, tough. You don't vote. But what do you do with people after they get out of prison? No problem here. In many states, they ban you for life. So if you're convicted of a felony in Florida, you're banned for life. Now, again, if you know anything about the American criminal justice system, there is a controversy around the predominantly, aggressive policing tactics against minority populations, and particularly the use of fairly small crimes to add up, and 3 strikes you're out, or things like that. So you can get a felony conviction quite easily. If you carry a certain amount of crack cocaine, you've got a felony conviction. Okay, that means you don't vote for the rest of your life. It's a very, very effective way of removing the franchise from a certain population. Again, it doesn't have a huge effect because it's not like the turnout amongst these groups were very high in the first place. But again, just removing them from the register, stopping them from voting forever, is very effective. And in fact, Florida used that technique very, very effectively just before Ron DeSantis ran for election. He only won his election by 30,000 votes the last time he ran. And again, if you count up the number of people they purged off the rolls and the number of people they banned from voting forever, that might have been crucial if you've got a very, very tight election. So again, there's a long tradition of this. You've got to be subtle. You can't be obvious about it. You can use voter ID, which the Conservative Party picked up in this country is a great tactic. And so in the U.S., there are certain states, all Republican, who require IDs. Okay, well, which ID do you require? Can you use your student ID? Oh, no, you don't want students voting. Are you kidding? Absolutely not. Again, my state just did this. My university, which has a really strict system, and you have to use your Social Security number for your student ID, and you can use it as a credit card, so it's actually very secure. They started using it as a voter ID, and of course they got sued, and the North Carolina Supreme Court just ruled against them. So all those students can no longer use their ID. They've got to have an official driver's license or passport. Most Americans don't have passports, so don't go there. So again, this is using voter ID. Voter ID is a classic way of suppressing the vote, of trying to depress it, getting it down a little bit. Again, it's not stopping everyone. It just takes it down on the edges. Now, of course, you don't want to be too strict with this. And again, the courts have been fairly careful to have some form of exception for people without IDs. What happens to people in old people's homes? They don't drive. They don't have driver's licenses. They don't need them. So you can exempt them. So old people are exempted. How do they tend to vote? Can't imagine. So again, certain groups are privileged in this process. Okay, so how are we doing? I don't want to get too much. And how are their votes counted? And this is the crucial one. And this is we come to gerrymandering. The good news was that the process of American voting does have certain corrupt aspects to it. And again, Trump would like to steal it. I mean, we haven't talked about how to count the votes. Again, this is what Trump tried to do, the Stop the Steal campaign in 2016, where, there were a number of things he did, and I don't want to get into all of them. The thing he should be in prison for is phoning up the Georgia director of elections and saying, can you find me 10,000 votes? Okay, if you try to vote illegally in North Carolina, they will put you in prison for a number of years. Just if you don't have the right to vote and you try to vote. Okay, what should they do if you try to get 10,000 votes illegally? And then we have him on tape saying this. Okay, this is the criminal trial that if he's president, you can't try him for that. So he needs to win. But again, that's, we'll see where we get that. That's the crime I think is unforgivable. The other one he's on trial for is the January the 6th riots, sending them into the Capitol. So he was trying to stop the House from ratifying the results of the election. So legally, again, this is the conspiracy theory. If it's a perfect tie, or you can claim there were some irregularities in one of the swing states, you can try to get your people to not ratify the election. Okay, what happens if you don't ratify it? Okay, let's go back. Where were we? If I go right back, what happens if North Carolina refuses to ratify? What happens to those 15 votes? Nothing. They don't go into the hopper. Okay, if you don't get a majority of the votes, you can't win. You have to have 270. If you don't have 270, it goes to the House of Representatives, who is Republican controlled. So again, there's lots of conspiracy theories. Would they actually vote for Trump? It'd be a fun experiment. If Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, who's Republican, had his Republican House members voting to be the president, wouldn't he get them to vote for him? That's what I'd do. But again, we don't know what will happen. So that's the conspiracy theory. That's the Trump plan B, as it were. If he loses the election, and he tries to again, he's not as amateurish as 2016. He's not going to try to steal the election. He's going to try to call it into question and not let it be ratified, at which point it goes to the House, which is Republican controlled, and they decide who president is. And that would be kind of interesting. Because in theory, the Democrats could go into coalition with some of the Republicans and come up with another candidate. It would be chaos. I really hope this doesn't happen. But yeah, I don't think this, I can't see this happening. The last perfect tie we had was in 2000, and that was because that was Florida, and that was a whole lot of things that went wrong in a huge cascade, and it was nobody's fault. It was not a conspiracy. It was just incompetence across the board, both Democrat and Republican. So yeah, I don't see this happening. The last time it happened, 2016, all of the legal bulwarks worked. Okay, that's not the lever I want to hinge democracy on, but yeah, it did work. None of these Republicans seem particularly inclined to want to steal an election. And Brad Raffensperger, from Georgia, I don't want to give him a lot of credit for not being a crook, but they did stand up to him, and he was smart enough to tape the conversation as well, which is why he's in trouble. But yeah, you see how this goes. Trump may try to steal the election, but he's not going to be able to steal it. He might be able to throw it into chaos and stop it from being ratified at best. But again, we need a perfect tie for that to happen. When you try to do this sort of thing, you take it to court and you say, well, we have some irregularities around the election. This is what he claimed in 2020. And he sent his lawyer, Sidney Powell, out and claimed all sorts of conspiracy theories about illegal immigrants voting and irregularities and voting machines that were spitting out lots of Biden votes. In fact, Fox News paid a lot of money to this company because they kept repeating these conspiracy theories. There's no evidence for them whatsoever. And in fact, Republican judge after Republican judge after Republican judge found in a court of law that you actually have to have evidence if you want to make claims like that. And in the U.S., where it's almost impossible to sue somebody for libel, Fox News got done. Now that they settled before the case came out, so we don't know if they'd been found guilty, but we suspect they would have. So yeah, you got to be a little bit careful about that. But nonetheless, the system seems to work. Trump is not going to steal the election. That's the good news. The bad news is he doesn't have to, because we have this thing called gerrymandering. And again, gerrymandering goes away. This is Elbridge. Sorry, you don't have to read any of this. This is Massachusetts, and this goes back to Elbridge Gerry, who was Speaker of the House and wanted to make sure he stayed in office, and so he manipulated his electoral district around where all his supporters were. So again, gerrymandering just refers to drawing district lines in a way that will advantage somebody. So this is a long tradition in American politics. It was used usually to protect leaders within a legislature. So states would do this routinely to make sure the speaker didn't lose their seat, or things like that. It was done in a sort of amateurish level to protect elites, but that was about it. It wasn't used as a partisan tool. And then, let's just go there. And then there's another form of gerrymandering. There's the U.S. Senate. The U.S. Senate is a deeply undemocratic, unrepresentative body. You get 2 senators per state. Okay, so if you look at 15 states with 38 million people get 30 senators. California with 40 million people gets 2. And these are so we've got 30 Republican senators already lined up against you. The Senate is inherently biased against Democrats. Okay, that's not a conspiracy, it's just a historical thing. We just have a lot of rural states that we created, and everyone then moved to California. So, this is, again, I wouldn't have called it white power, I'd call it rural power more than anything else. But rural areas do tend to be largely white, and not very many people. So, states with very, very beautiful territory, the Wyomings and the Montanas of this world, create a body that is inherently undemocratic. And the Senate will almost certainly turn Republican this election cycle. So whoever gets in, the Republicans will have some control over any nominees, whoever wins the presidency. Okay, so the Senate is so undemocratic, in fact, that the Supreme Court will not allow any American states to replicate this system in their own legislatures. So we had a court case in 1964, and the Supreme Court ruled that this is so undemocratic that you can't do it. And the state defense was, Senate, the U.S. government, the Constitution, and the Supreme Court said, yeah, but that's written in there. Yours is not allowed. So nobody else is allowed to do this, only the Senate. So even the current Supreme Court, in theory, they haven't ruled on this recently. But again, you're not allowed to do this sort of thing in states, state government. Okay, so that takes us to the Electoral College. Again, the Electoral College, we discussed this. It's not democratic entirely, and again, we've had a lot of elections in which the popular vote is different from the Electoral College vote. And again, that only works where it's very, very tight. And so, you've got certain states which are very tight, and then the Democratic states where all the urban areas are, California, New York particularly, the Democrats rack up votes and they don't do them any good. So again, we've got a lot of gerrymandered districts in the United States already. But what happened was the Republicans figured out this was actually a really good technique for winning seats. And so what happened was they weaponized it in the year 2010. And they funded a project called Operation Red Map, in which they used 2 things which changed the game on this. Computerized mapping, GIS software, and you combine that with, God help us, election simulation software, which is developed by a political scientist in Oklahoma who's deeply sorry for what he did, and he joined the court case against us, by the way. But he took the money and he developed a software system that allowed them to gerrymander the heck out of seats. So what they did was they captured a bunch of state legislatures in 2010 when the census came in. And when the census comes in, you have to redistrict. And they said, hey, let's let the map Let's draw the districts in the maps so that we can maximize our own seats. And it is amazing how biased you can make this. Now, there's Democrats, the Democratic states are beginning to cotton onto this, and there are a few that are doing this as well. So, Illinois in particular has done this. But my state's one of the central targets for this. And we have court case after court case after court case. And gerrymandering, unfortunately, works. So North Carolina, we had a court case, and the North Carolina Supreme Court, which at the time was Democratic, we elect our judges, by the way. It was, okay, there was a court-imposed model here in 2022, and it created 7 Republicans, 7 Democrats from the congressional delegation there. So that's court-imposed. The court-imposed, it had a political scientist, of course, draw up the districts, trying to do what you do in this country. You try to go along community lines. The Supreme Court was captured by the Republicans the next year, and they then rewrote the map, and they've now gone to 10 Republicans and 4 Democrats. Just to let you know, North Carolina is a purple state. We vote 50-50, pretty much. So the 7 Democrats, 7 Republicans was from a 50-50 vote. 10 Republicans, 4 Democrats was from a 50-50 vote. You don't need to be an authoritarian. You can have a democratic system. If you want to stitch it up, you can stitch it up. The way in which computers can draw district lines, unfortunately, has weaponized this to a level that is really, really dire. So the Republicans figured this out. They were really effective at it, and they've pretty much captured a whole number of seats in Congress on the basis of this. Just to give you another sense of how this works, in Austin, Texas. Austin, if you know anything about Austin, is a deeply liberal college town. It's extremely arty. It's this nice little Athens of Texas, I guess I would call it. There's not a single Democrat in it, even though it's an incredibly left-wing Democratic bastion of Texas. Because what Texas did was it came in and it took little pieces of Austin and it peeled them off and it mixed them with the county. And you can only you don't want too many Democrats because you might win an election if you do that. So again, if you just spread the Democrats out perfectly, it's what we call packing and cracking. And so Austin has no Democratic representation at all, even though it is a massive Democratic stronghold within Texas. There we go. So that's what gerrymandering will allow you to do. And this is unfortunately the state of things. Let me go back to where we were. In terms of the gerrymandered states at the moment, you can see where this is going. Texas, large state. Florida, large state. The biggest states and the biggest Republican states in the United States gerrymander. And so we think the Republicans are going to get a net gain of 16 Republican seats from manipulating the boundaries. These are seats that are above and beyond where their vote total will be. You're assuming that if Harris gets 50% of the vote, then you get 50% Democrats, which doesn't always happen. If you have bad candidates, or if you have good candidates, you can perform above that. But this is above the average for the presidential vote from 2020. So yeah, we know the Republicans are going to capture 16 more seats that they weren't going to get before. They've only got a majority of 4, but this is why the polls are suggesting that they're going to capture the House. It's quite likely. Again, not because they're popular, but because they've gerrymandered the districts very, very effectively. They will lose the popular vote nationally, but they will gain a majority in the House. So again, gerrymandering is the biggest threat to American democracy. I'm afraid it's already here. How do you solve it? We're trying in different ways. Americans aren't actually this partisan. Most people think this is evil and don't like it. Ohio right now, which has a referendum process, the citizens have put forward a referendum to get rid of gerrymandering and have a nonpartisan panel decide the districts. Great idea. Except the Ohio legislature is made up of Republicans, and they rewrote the referendum. So it's going to be on this election. We're going to see what happens. They rewrote the referendum to say, should we mandate a nonpartisan panel to gerrymander the districts every single year that we have to redistrict? So again, they've slipped that word in. So poor old Ohioans, we'll test how educated they are in terms of the issues. But they're going to vote on this, and we'll see what happens. When states vote on this, they vote against it. They vote for a nonpartisan way. Americans are not inherently corrupt about how they want to win in politics. The parties are. If the Democrats want to do something about it, the Democrats hate gerrymandering. They all campaign against it, But what do you do if the opposition's weaponized it? This is like, I don't know if it's sports terms. If you know all the other side's referees are crooked, what do you do? If you have neutral referees, you're going to lose the league. And this is what happens. If the Democrats want to do this seriously, well, they tried to do it. They weaponized it in New York. New York tried to gerrymander. And the New York Supreme Court, which is made up of Democrats, said, no, that's not proper. You can't do that. That's undemocratic. So they stopped them. But that also means that New York is going to be subjected to a Republican Congress because they don't want to play the game. So again, the Democrats have a dilemma. If you want to weaponize this, then you need California and you need New York to do the same thing that Texas and Florida do. And you'll even the odds. And then we'll actually see what people want to vote for. But there we go. So that's the state of the American election. And I think I'll end on that happy note.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming back so promptly, and plenty of questions on the table. And we've got Zena with a microphone downstairs, I think. Is Zena downstairs? She's somewhere. And we've got Dave, I think, upstairs with a mic. So put your hand up if you'd like to ask a question on the mic, just to see if there's anyone for starters. And I'll kick off with Maurice Stanistreet's question. Are younger people more persuaded to vote, and for whom?
We're going to find out, aren't we? Trump is banking on young men, which is daring, I would say. And again, we will see. Young women seem pretty motivated at the moment. And so, again, the Harris campaign is absolutely going after them on the issue of abortion. And they're pretty motivated. So again, Trump is trying to erode into the Democratic base, particularly with again, you see him get a little bit of support with young Hispanics, some young black men, and again, those are we're talking about groups that vote 90% Democratic. So he's just trying to erode a little bit of that. But again, he's banking on turnout being high for those groups who do not traditionally vote. So we'll see. It's a gamble. I'm going with the questions that are directly coming from your talk, and then we've got some that broaden it out. Tim O'Malley's one asking, are some opinion polls that you mentioned still over-reliant on voters with landline phones, thereby biasing the data towards older people? They claim not. The problem at the moment is if you go to 538 or any of the aggregators, New York Times, Nate Silver's newsletter, they're all including a lot of polls who are partisan, and we certainly know the Trump campaign is flooding the zone with garbage polls to say, oh, he's winning. Trump's ahead by 2 points nationally. We know he's not. And again, they're trying to move the dial on the aggregator polls. He's telling everyone he's won. And again, the Democrats, being Democrats, had a wobble, if you've seen in the press the past couple of days. They've begun to get their mojo back a little bit now. So we'll see. But again, the Trump campaign was trying to intimidate the opposition. So we have no clue because traditionally, the polls have been off. They've over-predicted Democrats, and they claim they've fixed it, but we won't know until the day. And again, turnout will change. Trump his campaign never fails to amaze me, he's a chaos merchant, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I think making fun of Puerto Ricans was a really bad move, but again, we have no idea how that's going to move the dial at the last minute. So the polls have consistently said it's a flip, it's a tie. I would buy that, and again, we don't know which way it's going to move. So I wouldn't worry too much about the polls at this stage because there's so little known about how inaccurate they are. We'll find out afterwards, but we won't find out until afterwards. You can't trust them within the margin of error, and so they are consistently saying it's neck and neck. That I'll buy. Harris is slightly ahead nationally, but totally tied in the key states.
We got quite a few questions about the Electoral College and thoughts coming from that. So I'm going to share a number of these with you, and then you can sort of, it's a basis for a whole new talk, I think, but if you could do your best, John. Julie's asking who was responsible for the development of the electoral college system, and why do places like Puerto Rico have no representation on it? I mean, that's a talk in its own right. Andrew Church puts it another way. For a presidential election, and maybe he's thinking about other countries here, because you have different voting systems for different purposes. For a presidential election, why not adopt that the winner is the person with the most votes? Popular vote argument. And Jeff Tucker, is there no groundswell to change the disproportionate voting disparities within the electoral college system in a country that purports to be democratic? And Dave Martin, even bigger talk when you get to talk after me. Based on your talk tonight, I'm tempted to think that America needs to rewrite the Constitution. Do you agree, and is it likely to happen? That might be the easiest question to answer. But you get the flavour. Get rid of the electoral college system.
Well, I mean, the electoral college is a facet of 1787. We wrote the Constitution. Ironically, it was designed to keep people like Donald Trump from getting in office. The notion was that if you elect the great and the good, then they will use their considerable judgment to elect decent people. And you don't want to trust the people with that kind of decision, because the people are idiots. So again, the founders were deeply distrustful of democracy. So we're stuck with this. We haven't changed it since 70. We rewrite the Constitution all the time. Supreme Court does it, just reinterpret stuff. So that's the easiest way to do it. But, I mean, no, there is a way to do it. The states would need to, and there's been a movement amongst democratic states. It's not going to work because the Republican states have no incentive to do this. This is a winning game for them. They routinely lose national elections in terms of the popular vote. Why would they vote to change the system? And they control the Senate. Or they will control the Senate pretty soon. So I'm afraid the prospects for that are not great. What the one movement has been to make all the states not use winner take all and be proportional. And so what they've done, a number of states have passed trigger laws saying that, okay, when a majority of the states in the U.S. adopt this system, we will then move to majority vote of the electors. So yeah, again, some states do that. Two of them, if you saw on there was two little funny dots, Maine and Nebraska, allocate their electors based on the congressional vote. So they have three, they each have, I think, 2 or 3 congressional districts, and then whoever wins them gets the votes. So they're proportional, but yeah, we'd have to do it across the board. And why would the Republicans do that?
Change the Constitution?
Change the Constitution. Good luck with that. 2/3 vote, you need to, first of all, 2/3 vote of the Senate and the House, and then 3/4 of the states. And remember, all those states are Republican. So yeah, I think.
When was the last time any part of it was changed?
Oh man, the last amendment, was it 27th? It was sitting on the books for 200 years, and bless them, a PhD student found this thing sitting there. Hey, no one finished ratifying this thing. And it was if you vote yourself a pay rise, it doesn't come into effect until after the next election. And then we're, yeah, let's have that. So that's the last change. The only changes we make are stupid ones, minor, uncontroversial things. So yeah, again, just change the Supreme Court if you want to change this Constitution. We just did. We had a right to an abortion for 50 years. Now we don't. So again, it just requires 5 justices. That's a lot easier. So watch this space. It'll take a generation, though.
Anne in your audience says a man in Pennsylvania asked today, and maybe she heard him on the radio, if we, the people, elect one person, but the electoral system can change that, why should I bother to vote? So how would you answer him? So the question of apathy within a system like this, in this country, we have apathy about voting. What about the American dimension of that?
It's remember, it's a federal system. Don't think of the Americas as Britain. Think of us as the EU. right? So if you're having European elections in France, okay, you're being voting for other stuff as well. You're voting for French delegates and French, just voted in North Carolina, and it was two sides. I should have brought it tonight. It's two sides of A3. And I had to vote for president and congressman and governor. And oh yeah, if you want to Google North Carolina, you'll see the Republican candidate. He's the one who keeps calling himself a Nazi. So again, there's lots of other things on the ballot. So that keeps turnout going. I mean, it's much higher in a presidential election. It's not as bad as that because the president's not the entire game. And so that again keeps motivation going. It is a problem with the news. You can't be doing the electoral polls or announcing the exit polls while California is still voting, because we did that during, I think it was during Carter. And everyone in California went, oh, I know who won. And they didn't turn out. As you said, turnout just went off a cliff. So we tend to be careful about that. But no, people are more interested in their state and their local government than they are the national. So they will turn out for that as well.
The next question is possibly for a historian. Jeff Elliott and Julie, I'll combine their questions. So Jeff's question is, why is the USA so polarized politically? You might want to explore, just dig into that a little bit. And Julie's wondering, how has the US remained a democracy for so long, and how long will this be the case? So you might look forward as well.
Well, asked me on the 6th of January, or the 6th of November. Again, I'm going to spend the rest of my career talking about polarization, I can see. In fact, I'm supposed to do a big talk on polarization in Pennsylvania on the 13th of November. So that will be interesting.
You'll have an armed guard.
Why? I might need one. No, I can go to Pennsylvania and say, what were you people thinking? But yeah. So what's caused polarization? The two parties have moved apart. The Democrat Party hasn't moved very much. They've gotten a little bit more left-wing, only a teeny bit. It's the Republicans have become deeply conservative in a massively quick way, which has moved the parties apart. And the national conversation is no. I mean, again, when Biden was a senator, I grew up with North Carolina senators who were very conservative Republicans. And again, they would always work across the aisle with Democrats. It was no problem. And as the parties moved apart, they began to do winner take all. And I think people just lost trust. And if they don't trust each other, then it all falls apart. How do you fix that? I don't know. And in the long run, you have to trust each other again. But that requires a little heat to come out of it. I don't see that happening anytime soon. So I'm afraid it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Length of time? How long is it going to take? 20?
Well, I mean, we've seen this before. Well, the Civil War, how long did it take? It's going to be a generation.
Sorry, I'm not trying to make it difficult to you, but I mean, is it a case that get Trump out of the way, if he wins, he has his 5 years and we put up with it, and then do we get back to something more normal that I think the audience is hoping, or will it still be desperately polarized?
Well, no, I mean, Trump is a symptom. He's not the cause. He's made it worse. But, Operation Red Map was 2010. Trump wasn't even a politician then. He didn't begin to think about running until Obama made a joke about him at the press corps dinner. And again, this is not Trump entirely. Trump is feeding this, and he's certainly changed the Republican Party beyond what I ever thought I'd see in my lifetime. See Russia as a pal. But nonetheless, whether Trump wins or not, it doesn't matter. The Republicans are going to take the Senate. The Republicans probably will take the House. Even if Harris wins, you're still going to have a deeply divided country that is still going to have a long way to go. This is going to take a generation, I think. It's kind of like peace in any conflict area. It takes confidence building moves that are quite methodical and small, and I think just cleaning up the elections and stopping gerrymandering would be a start. Because of course that rewards people for being radical. But yeah, until we have a system that actually represents how people think, I think it's going to be doomed. But again, most people are not quite as, most people don't think about politics. I'm banned from talking about politics when I go home, well, for good reason. But it's most Americans don't want to think about this, and so they would be quite happy if it all cooled off and was a bit more quiet. But that's going to take a while.
A point of detail, you might not have the figures off the top of your head, but Chris Nibbs is wondering, he wants a statistical clarification. If it's so hard to be a registered voter, as you were explaining, he's wondering what percentage of legal adults are in fact registered voters. Is that known?
I don't know the national figure. I know the state figures. In most states, it's okay. In the good states, it's above 90%, and those are the northern ones. Anything on the Canadian border, basically, is over 90%. And southern states, it can be under 66%. So again, it varies wildly by state. I don't actually know the national figure because we vote state by state, so that tends to be what I know. But again, the voter registration is I think it's just over 2/3, roughly.
I'd like to introduce a question from Jill Jones, and it reminds me of an article I was reading in The Economist just in the last 24 hours, which talks strangely about mandatory voting systems in South America, which is quite extensive, but not necessarily productive. Jill wonders, would you advocate a mandatory voting system, as she says, in Australia? But it's not the only country with one.
It's a very economist thing to argue. Yes, the world is a rational place if we simply put little nudge policies in place. I wouldn't mind. I mean, yeah. Turnout's been very high for presidential elections. I'd prefer to have it for local elections, actually, where turnout's terrible. Yeah, I think that'd be great. If we made school board elections, you get fined if you don't vote. I think that would be super. But that's not a very winning position in the U.S. right now, I think. But again, turnout doesn't mean things work great. Trump brings turnout up like nobody else, and it's not necessarily a symptom of happiness. But I think for state and local elections, it would be a great thing.
Anyone upstairs wanting the microphone? Anyone down here? Right. I'll one at the front. I'll carry on for the moment. Gordon Woodcock wants you to explore the word fascist. I think it's he says 13 former Trump White House officials signed an open letter backing former Trump Chief of Staff John Kelly, who told the New York Times that Trump fits the definition of a fascist. So why might US voters continue to support him? Do you like to sort of explore that label that's been put on him?
Yeah, okay, from in an academic discussion, you could certainly argue he said himself he wants to be a dictator if he wins. I mean, come on. As a campaign tool, it's not effective. The Republican in my state who's running for governor called himself a Nazi, which was kind of weird, but he's also a fan of Hitler, so I don't know. But Trump being called a fascist by Democrats does not play well. You're voting for a fascist. Shaking your finger at Republicans is not a way to convince them. And I thought it was an unwise move. Okay, this was one of the Trump officials saying this, and I thought it was fine. But I don't think the Harris administration, the Harris campaign, is going to get any votes calling him a fascist. You go after the issues you want. I don't think that tracks through to Americans. People who know what the word fascist means and believe he's a fascist weren't voting for him anyway. So that's not your group.
So you've got a question on the front row on your left.
John, thanks for your fascinating talk this evening. I wonder if I can just broaden it a little bit and ask you whether you've got any thoughts on elections elsewhere in the globe, like Georgia, for example, and France, and the way things get rigged in other places.
Right. My knowledge of rigging elections elsewhere is non-existent. I've some knowledge of populism, and then again, Trump is not unique in this. We see a rise of populism, we see a rise of authoritarianism, and so he's not a unique phenomenon. I think he's a unique character, but we see this pattern elsewhere. And again, it's where people do not trust the system, where they're giving up on the system. But you get a strong man coming in saying, I'll fix this. It's a very tempting thing. And we've seen it before, we'll see it again. It's just very, very important to try to stop it in its tracks. So we'll see how that goes.
Let's turn to funding. Quite a few questions about a four-letter word beginning with M. Right, let me just get them in order. So, with Pennsylvania being such a key state, how do you think the court case against Musk's lottery will play out? Everyone familiar with what's going on there? Is it $1 million a day?
Yeah, I mean...
And
yes.
And someone else is asking, Nick Lloyd, is the Musk lottery legal? Alistair Duncan thinks the American electoral system is totally corrupted by the vast sums of money that are spent by election candidates. Would it be better to set a cap on the amount that can be spent? And Ian Watson, the same. Is there a cap on political donations for candidates? And so he's wondering why Musk is allowed to be so partisan. And then there's another question, which I'll just add to all of that, so you can explore the legality of it, its effectiveness. And someone else is asking, what exactly is Elon Musk going to gain from his sponsorship of Trump? If you could do that at the end, having explored the...
Oh boy. Yeah, I mean, in terms of money, yeah, I mean, people are of two minds, and in fact, Trump addressed this argument in 2016. He said, "I can't be bought. I'm too rich," and that's why you should vote for a billionaire, because we can't be bought. In terms of the role of money, and there is actually a cap for political candidates. You do have limits that you have to accede to, and when you give money, you have to identify yourself. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court in 2010 in the Citizens United case declared that speech is free and that money is speech. And therefore, if it's an independent person who wants to say whatever they want, I mean, if Elon Musk decides he wants to spend $1 billion saying that Donald Trump's great and you should elect him, he can do that as long as he doesn't coordinate with the Trump campaign. He is independently allowed to say whatever he likes. And so, again, that's the position of the court. On the other hand, we're spending $5 billion on this election, and the importance of $1 million here, $1 million there it's a nice publicity stunt, but it's nothing more than that. It probably is illegal, by the way. In Pennsylvania, there's a law against providing an economic incentive to vote. So, okay, it's quite a tricky one, and is he really bribing people? No. So he's not majorly doing anything unethical, but he might be holed up. But Elon Musk has really good lawyers, and I've never seen him struggle too much with that. So I think he'll be fine. I don't think he's going to do prison time. What he's doing is probably illegal, but he's only doing it because it's a stunt. So it doesn't matter. By the time they take him to court, it'll be 2 years into the Trump administration, and he'll probably get a pardon. So now, what will he get out of it? Again, you can see this from the Washington Post. Jeff Bezos, paid homage to Trump on the day that he refused to endorse Harris, and can't imagine why. And he said openly, "I did it because we've got a load of contracts with the government, and I don't want, the Trump administration. Trump holds grudges like nobody." So from a business perspective, I'm somewhat sympathetic. Although quite a few of my friends have canceled their Washington Post subscriptions. Although on Twitter, some wag said, if you really want to hurt him, cancel your Amazon Prime subscription. Don't hurt the reporters. The Washington Post is actually a very, very good paper.
Adrian Cartwright puts it this way. If the Democrats win by a narrow margin, Trump will contest the result. Statement.
Guaranteed.
If the Republicans win by a narrow majority, would Kamala Harris contest the result?
Well, I mean, there's a standard process for recounts. Would Harris contest the result if it was counted and she lost by 10,000 in Michigan, as Hillary Clinton did in 2016? No, she wouldn't contest it, I don't think. Will Trump contest it? Absolutely. He's been planning to contest this for 4 years. He has explicitly gone after state to try to put officials in. Now, Now, he can go ahead and contest it. We've had this before. There is a legal system by which the courts require you to submit the results of the election. And they can compel you to do that, even if you're a MAGA supporter and you say that it was a bunch of illegals coming in and voting on the machines, and no, you don't have evidence for that, but you know they did it. Courts don't put up with that. Even the Trump judges, who sometimes are not all that nonpartisan, have refused to countenance any of this. You have to have evidence at a court of law. You can't just contest it and say the machines were corrupt, we think. You have to have evidence or it doesn't work. So again, we think the process, most of the legal experts, even on the Democratic side, suspect it will be okay. That doesn't mean you don't plan for this. The Democrats have known this. A number of states have explicitly rejected Trump appointees or Trump nominees for election to these positions. So again, the American public, even in Trump states, is not very happy about it. So I don't foresee Trump succeeding in this. Now, if it's a perfect tie, what happened in Florida in 2000 was we didn't know who won because they screwed up so many ballots. The Democrats in Miami, because there were lots of elderly voters and it's hard to, American ballots are incredibly detailed. So to make it easier for them, they put them on two pieces of paper, butterfly ballots, and you just took the two pieces together. So you have the ballot on one side and you have the other side that you punch holes in. And the problem is they didn't line them up properly. And so Pat Buchanan, who was he's a fascist sort of candidate who was running to the right of Bush, he got 50,000 votes in Miami. And he laughed and said, yeah, no way I got 50,000 votes in Miami. Again, the Democrats screwed that up, with good intentions. The Republicans screwed up the absentee ballots. All the military votes were not in on time, and there's a question, okay, technically they're late. What do you do with them? Okay, morally, you need to count them, but they missed the deadline. That's tough. If the American Postal Service is incompetent and not operating properly, do you take account of that? So again, there's some serious questions about how you count these, and we have a process and we can fight over it, but it only comes into effect if it's a perfect tie. And again, that was what happened in Florida. In Florida, they couldn't, because they screwed the ballots up. We had the hanging chads, God help us. I just did mine electronically, so mine can't be screwed up. But if they hack the software, well, this is the nice thing, because we're decentralized and unprofessional. You'd have to hack machines in every single district that are attached to each other. So it'd actually be really hard to stitch up an American election properly. You can stitch up the districts, but you can't stitch up the vote process very easily. You can do one district at a time, and if it's a swing state, look, if it's a vote down to 5,000 votes in Philadelphia, and you suddenly start challenging all the votes because you've got Trump observers, you could make a difference of a few hundred votes. You can't stitch the election up, but you can move the dial a teeny bit if it's a tie. But it has to be a tie first, and that's, please don't be a tie. But, the chances of that are very, very low. Florida, again, was a huge mess in so many ways. There were thousands of votes in question, and it was a perfect tie. I think the official count was just a couple thousand between the two of them. We probably won't see that. I think it'll swing one way or the other. Again, depending on turnout. I could be wrong, but we'll see. If it's a tie, we're in trouble, right? Because then you can fight out every single ballot, and you can fight out every single voter who didn't have an ID. And again, technically, you can come back within 2 weeks and bring your ID in.
A final thought on contesting.
Yes.
If Trump contests this election, do we see a man who will wait until the last minute and then there'll be a knee-jerk reaction and he'll do something in some area? Or has he is he bankrolled a team of intelligent, scientific people, a couple of hundred people, to work out how he could possibly challenge the vote in any of these states that might go against him? Is there a rational scientific approach bankrolled already in operation?
Well, there's a legal approach, yes. He's laid some groundwork, and he has it was so incompetently done in 2016. It was comedic, and most of the lawyers involved have been disbarred or put in prison. So, it's not going to be like that. He's learned, and then, again, this is the great fear of Democrats. He's learned from being in office for 4 years, and again, this is not an incompetent attempt. But you can't just stitch up an election. Judges don't like that sort of thing. They ask for evidence if you're going to try to do stuff. So if you want to contest an election, what you can contest is you can contest the votes within each precinct. You can contest certain ballots that don't look right. You can contest whether someone has the right to vote. Again, that's on the election night itself. Trump, again, will file lawsuits if he loses, and he'll try to throw it all into touch and try to contest the actual results. His ability to do that that's a Hail Mary legally. Okay, if the Supreme Court completely wants to upend an American election, they could. That would be the end of American democracy to a certain extent. And I think most Republicans have shown themselves to be not willing to do that. Okay, I'm basing it on 2016. So I'm somewhat hopeful that judges tend to be fairly serious about the law. It's kind of what they do. So they haven't been very receptive to that. If the Supreme Court completely wants to upend the way it does election law, it could happen, yeah. Trump's appointed quite a few of them, so it is possible, but I'd say that's a complete Hail Mary, and I don't foresee it happening.
Could you explore John Mottram's hypothetical question? In the event of serious disorder, and of course we saw that before, post-election, what role would the US military potentially play?
They wouldn't want to have anything to do. Well, again, none. Trump is not going to be president, right? He doesn't take office until January 20th, so it'll be fine. He is not in charge of the military. And the military, that was what John Kelly broke with him over. He deeply disapproved of the use of the military. Trump asked for it. It didn't, and again, all they did was come out for that photo call with the Bible wrong side up in the Capitol. They tear gassed a lot of people, but that wasn't the military doing that. That was a different group. Will Trump use the military? Yeah, of course he said he would. I would not look forward to 4 years of Trump in office. He said he's going to go after the people who are his enemies and lock them up. That's step one in fascism. He's going to use the military in a very aggressive way. He's going to use he doesn't usually use the military. The military actually has a very professional code of conduct, and they're not supposed to do that, and they know it. But you can use Homeland Security. You can use other agents of the federal government, and those are usually who Trump used in the previous riots. But you don't need to. You can call it the National Guard. There's plenty of law enforcement in the United States. I don't look forward to a Trump administration in that sense, but he's not going to be in power when this election happens. So it's not going to be chaotic. It's not going to be. I suspect this is going to go through fairly well. In the pandemic, the 2020 election went smooth as silk, as smooth as you could ask for. There were lots of challenges. They went to court as they should. They looked at the evidence. The judges said, you got nothing. And off we go. Again, the riots were the one thing that nobody saw coming. But again, the riots did not have any effect whatsoever on the political process. So I don't foresee any threats in that sense.
We've got a question upstairs. If you look above the projector,
yep.
Someone with a question.
Yes. My question has more to do with American foreign policy. Because of the intervention of the Labour Party, it seems to have upset Trump quite a lot. And he's threatened to cancel the special relationship. That would have an awful impact on NATO and therefore the whole of the American foreign policy towards communism. What would your position be on that? Is he likely to do it if he got in?
Well, first of all, the Labour Party the Labour Party didn't do it. It's activists going over. And this happens every election, by the way. They always send a bunch of people over to watch and to take part. And of course, they're sympathetic to the Democrats. So this was the Trump campaign using it as a nice public relations coup. A bunch of foreigners from another country coming over, working for the Democrats. See, this is what we get. And again, the Democrats have been complaining about outside election interference by Russia, by China, again, by a number of different actors. And so the Trump administration can complain about the British government doing the same thing. So you see the Democrats do it too. So I would see this as just a stunt by the Democrats, because the Labour Party does this every election. It's not an official position. It wasn't the government's official position. They should have repudiated it a little bit more vigorously very quickly. But and Trump holds grudges whatever he's going to do. He doesn't care about the special relationship one bit. He liked it because we were doing Brexit, and that fit with his sort of attack on NATO and things like that. Yeah, will he pull out of Europe? Absolutely. He's an isolationist. I mean, he is consistently an isolationist. He makes no bones about that. And so, yeah, Europe is going to have to pump a lot more money into defense, and Ukraine's going to get interesting. But I wouldn't worry too much about the special relationship. The Americans treat it as a convenient vehicle. It only operates when they want it to operate, and so I wouldn't put any faith in it no matter who's the president.
Chance for another microphone question if anyone wants to put up their hand. One in the second row in the center. Meanwhile, Jim Phil Pell asks, if Trump gets in, how much actual power will he have? Can he be blocked?
Well, that was the argument in 2016. It was like, oh, look, the American system was designed to... again, the Americans assume that anyone in power is a potential tyrant, and therefore you design a system to contain floodgates around anyone who could be. So nobody's in charge. And that is true. I mean, Trump, the president has limited power, and Trump is particularly bad at getting along with his allies. He stabs them in the back as often as he does his enemies. And so, again, the question is, has Trump learned anything? I'm not convinced he's going to operate any differently. When he got in 2016, the first thing he did was stab the Republicans in the back over immigration. We had an immigration deal. The Democrats and Republicans came together, and they went to Trump and said, look, we've agreed this. We parsed it all out. We'll put more border security in. We'll build your wall, and we get a pathway to citizenship for people who've been here for a long time. Done by Ronald Reagan in 1986, by the way. And so Trump said, fine, come on in for the signing. And then when they all showed up, he went, nah, I'm not doing it. And completely repeated them. Again, Mitch McConnell will have nothing to do with him after that. And so Trump got nothing past Congress. The Biden administration has struggled because it's, you have a Senate that's 50-50. You have to have 10 Republican votes, in essence, to pass legislation. Biden was able to get 3-4 bills passed. It takes a lot of effort. Trump doesn't put effort into stuff like that. So again, he's not going to get much done. But he doesn't want to do very much, to be honest. He wants to wreck stuff. And he's very good at that. If you want no environmental protection, okay, he's your man. If you'd like a trade war and lots of tariffs on various things, yeah, okay, he's your man. He can do a lot, but in terms of changing American policy, it's not quite so much. Although, if you're pro-choice, then he probably will stop abortion drugs being sent through the U.S. mail. But again, there are limited powers the president has, and he doesn't really want to intervene in foreign policy. And that's the good news. He's an isolationist. You want fascists to be isolationists if they're going to get elected. It could be much worse. Trust me. He could be an interventionist. That's sort of the glass half full, I suppose. But no, he won't get very much done as president, but that's not the purpose. He wants to shake things up. That's why people like him.
We're going to take a question in the second row.
If I've understood you correctly, I think you characterised the GOP as being quite aggressive, quite inventive in the way they've behaved, and on the contrary, the Democrats as really rather supine in these circumstances. And I wonder why this is the case, why it continues to be the case, and do you think it is likely to change?
Oof. I mean, I wouldn't be too critical of the Democrats. To be fair, I mean, I sort of mocked them in terms of gerrymandering. New York tried it, and the New York Supreme Court, which believes in rule of law, told them that was unconstitutional. They shouldn't do it, which is true. California has constitutionally imposed a nonpartisan system of district lines, which is the way you should do it. So again, they've kind of unilaterally disarmed, is how I'd put it. But again, it's if you're campaigning in favor of rule of law, it's hard to cheat and to try to make that your campaign position. To be fair, the Democrats can be ruthless. I mean, we have a Harris campaign. I mean, how can you see Trump standing down if he was unpopular? I mean, for the Democrats to be that unified and to coalesce around a candidate this late in the game, I mean, it is astounding that we actually have a race on our hands here. Trump was romping home with a huge victory after that debate with Biden, and it looked like complete disaster for the Democrats. And they did have the discipline, and again, I think Nancy Pelosi deserves sainthood for this if you're a Democrat. And Biden still hasn't spoken to her. He will never forgive her for this. But she got him to resign. The Democrats can be ruthless. It's just as a party that you don't associate. It's like Labor Party. You don't associate that with. It's not their brand. You know, they're not the evil geniuses. Yeah, they need some more of that. But it's a tough. They've had a tough road here, and they've made the best of what they can. And they may hold on to most of their Senate seats, which I would never have predicted 6 months ago.
We're now going to take another last question from the microphone. Please go ahead, in the middle.
In your talk, you sort of suggested, I think, that the Republicans were guilty, not the right word, of most of the dodgy practices. It goes back to 2010. Is that because if they did nothing, then demographically they would be wiped out in 20 to 30 years? Could they see the future? Let's say like the Protestants in Northern Ireland, they will just decline to nothing.
Well, you need to recruit more people as well. And again, there's lots of things going on. I mean, it was just an easy, open goal for them. I mean, it was one person, in fact, who saw the power of computerization to use computers and use simulation software to be able to design these districts so scientifically carefully that you would maximize your seats. Again, it's obvious, but no one had thought of it until then. Everyone just kind of, well, we have a district here, a district there for the speaker or for the leader of the committees. And no one had systematically weaponized it. So yeah, it was a moment in time. Now, again, the GOP is quite a big, huge group. These are the professionals within the GOP who are known for professionalism and winning elections. Trump is not their candidate. They hate him because he's as you've seen this week, he's a complete loose cannon. He has victory in his hands, and he went and mocked Puerto Ricans. If you look at Pennsylvania, there are quite a few Puerto Ricans in there. And again, if he loses the election on that, it's going to be a disaster. So again, you can't see the Republican Party as one group. They're deeply divided at this point. You've got rock solid conservatives who in the establishment hate Trump. You've got the never Trumpers who are again deeply conservative people who believe in rule of law. You've got the major populists who will just vote for whoever the Republican is, but don't really have a strong view on it. And then you've got a third of the Republicans who are serious Trump fans, many of whom are my family. But they're divided. They're as divided as the Democrats now. And issues like abortion again are splitting the GOP in a big way. But again, the minute in this current climate, the minute you nominate someone, that's it. The minute Trump became the nominee, everyone fell into line, and that didn't used to happen. Split votes don't happen as often as they used to. And again, the same for the Democrats. The minute you get Biden off the ticket and Harris came in, everyone went, oh my, thank God. And everyone came flooding in, which gave her this big boost that she needed.
Forgive me interrupting. I just want to get into two questions. And I'll get lynched if I don't ask this one, because Linda and Maddie will lynch me personally. So Maddie asks, is the question of abortion going to have any effect on the election? Linda puts it differently. What effect will the abortion issue have? And is it usual to have additional questions on the voting forms?
Wow. Yes, it is normal to have additional questions on the vote. Oh, I should have brought my ballot. Now, my ballot's it's two sides of A3. It's awful. You always have referendum questions. You have to vote for state and local officials. We have nonpartisan officials. My school board candidates have no party labels. So I have to Google them all and figure out who the nutters are. And and things like that. So again, that's why it's a progressive ballot reform that was meant to depress the turnout amongst working class people. If you can't be bothered to find out who these candidates are, then you shouldn't be voting.
And will the abortion issue?
And that works. And now the abortion issue, if Kamala Harris wins, it would be because of abortion. Absolutely, that is her issue. The problem is it's not the number one issue in this country. The number one issue is the economy. The number two issue is immigration. I think it's fourth. But again, it's fourth with a certain group of people named women. And they're a majority of the country. And they are a crucial, again, white, educated, women were the key to the Biden victory in 2020 in those 3 swing states. They will be the key. Again, educated white voters will be that sort of swing group that you can maybe pull over. If Trump loses, it will be because of abortion. Of course, if he wins, it will be because of abortion as well. That's, the evangelicals thought he was his candidate. That's the one promise he kept, by the way. He put people on the Supreme Court who made it fine or constitutional to outlaw abortion. And again, it's dividing the entire country in a huge way that people are annoyed about. And so if he loses, it is that issue that did it.
Are we going to finish with Pete Gray's question? Well, I'll have a little question after that. But in the event of a Trump victory, would the implementation of the 2025 project be the beginning of the end of democracy? And if we could just very quickly explain what his 2025 project is, and then where that might get us.
It's like 1,000 pages.
Just a quickie.
This is the Heritage Foundation, which is a conservative think tank, planning for the future and the wonderful conservative future of libertarianism. It's not a plan for the end of democracy, but it is a plan for the end of big government in the United States. We have a federal system. Currently we have a system that doesn't work anyway. Congress can never pass anything. We haven't had serious legislation since 2008 or 9, when Obama had a 60-vote majority in the Senate. That's the last bit of reform we had. We can spend money. That's all the national government can do. And that's important. I wouldn't write that off. The healthcare system is based on that. But if you eliminated all that, if the national government did nothing, you still have state governments. California can drive quite a bit of U.S. policy, so because we limit national power, the 2025 plan is one to strip the national government of power. And it may do that effectively. So you will have no national leadership. I'm not sure if modern government functions all that well without a reasonably vigorous national government in the 21st century. But nonetheless, if Trump gets in and he wins both houses of Congress, it will be interesting to see how much of that he enacts. He can stop the government from doing stuff. It doesn't mean he can do his own stuff, but it means he can stop them from doing what they are doing.
6 months ago, we asked John Herbert the sort of question I'm about to put to you. I'll put it this way, and I'm not talking about $1 million like Musk, but if I gave you $100 to go and place a bet on who's going to win, despite your personal opinions, what would you do to maximize the return from the $100?
I would bet on Trump because I've lost every political bet I've ever made.
Thank you very much, John. Fascinating evening, very topical. We're all wondering what's going to happen. I think John this evening has given us one of those great world affairs talks where you get right into the details of it and you go away with the feeling, yeah, I really do understand it a lot better now. I thought he explained that. Yes, is that true? Very complicated subject, and I thought he put it across extremely well with his maps and his talk. And of course, he's been forthright and clear in his views on all your usual googly questions. It's been a great evening. Thank you, Dr. Jonathan Parker.
Thank you very much.
Stand up and take it down.